All right. So today, I want to have a conversation about why businesses succeed or don't succeed. And the context for that is you'll see two entities or two people, right, starting their business, running their business. And on paper, they seem the same, right? They seem very similar. They both have a great product. They both have someone who is, capable and competent. But what we know is that magically, or not magically, as we're going to probably talk about today, some of those businesses succeed and some of them just don't grow. And I'm curious to know what you think the reason for that is. Is it magic?
I think you put two different people in identical businesses and see them the same offer and the same market and the same price point, like the same everything. You give them the same stuff and they'll achieve different results because they're two different people. And what I find makes the difference, and this is obviously we're speaking to consultants here, right? It's usually not how good you are at solving the problem that you solve. And it's usually not what market you chose. And it's usually not your price point. And it's usually not even your positioning, your messaging, although those things are all important, by the way. But if we're talking about like, why do some businesses, consulting businesses in particular, make it and like are able to grow and sustainably grow and achieve the kind of results they're looking for and scale if that's what you want? I think it has a lot more to do with the person pulling the strings than, frankly, we're comfortable admitting. Because it's a lot easier to just think, well, the right idea, the right offer, the right service with the right message, the right market, like that's all I need. If I get those things dialed in, it's going to be gravy. And I just don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree with you when you say that it's something that we don't like to admit or we don't like to talk about as much. But I think what can be freeing about this is understanding that it's not about the person. It's not that person A is going to do well and person B is not going to do well. It's truly about how either person A or person B are thinking about their business at that particular time. So I think what we're not trying to say is if you're the person that struggled, it means you can't do it. Or if you're the person who has done well, that's going to replicate itself over and over again. But what we want to really get into today is what's at the base of that. What is the mindset? What is the way of thinking that is common across all of those businesses that do well, that do grow, that do, meet whatever goal is that their founder has put in place?
Yeah, and I'll give you a few things that come to mind, and we can jump off of each of these as it makes sense. I think if there's a few variables that make the difference here. One is the goal. All things considered, those with, I don't want to say bigger goals because it's not about bigger goals, but I think it's about having more meaningful goals, being more connected to your goals, i.e. having both a clearer sense of what you're trying to achieve, like what is the goal, and a clearer sense of why that goal is particularly important to you. Where I see a lot of people struggle in business, especially in the earlier stages, is where they don't really know what they want, and they don't really know why they want it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a pretty bad recipe, right? That person just, and to your point, like this is not about, are you a good human or a bad human, right? This is not a judgment on your worth as a person, but all things considered, that person who doesn't really know what they want,
Mm-hmm.
i.e. they haven't really clarified the end game, and therefore they don't really know why they want it. It's kind of obvious. I don't have a ton of belief in that person's ability to see through the challenges that they're inevitably going to face in running a business and growing a business.
Mm-hmm. Well, and often when you ask somebody why they want to run their business, the answer is for the money, right? Or they'll give a number. And I think it's worth stopping here for a moment and talking about the fact that that isn't a goal, right? That is not a reason for getting up in the morning. That's not a reason for going through all of the challenging times that you're going to have this business run and be successful. And it's not that you shouldn't have a financial goal. Of course, we encourage that. I think it's important for people to really, pay attention to what that number is. But the real issue is, what does that number represent? Why do you want the money? And is it because you need to give your family a certain way of life? Is it because you want to, I don't know, contribute to the world in a different way financially? Is it because you want to be able to do your hobbies and these other things that bring you joy? What is the real reason that that number even exists? And I think the most important thing about that is it has to be a reason and a number that is important to you internally, personally, not the number that, Joe Blow on his Instagram reel told you should be aiming for. But it really needs to connect to the why you get up in the morning and the why you are willing to put yourself through all of the things you're going to have to put yourself through.
For a lot of people, especially earlier stage, it's they want to replace their income and not have a boss. No right or wrong answer.
Exactly.
What I want you to be is I want you to be clear on what the goal is, and I want you to be clear on why you want it. It's funny, we had this conversation with some clients this morning, and I said, I'm not here to judge your motivations. Mm-hmm. Y'all have good, unless you're planning on doing something seriously bad with the money, then I'm going to judge you a little bit, right? But for the most part, folks have good motivations. They want to be self-sufficient. They want balance, flexibility. They want to have impact. It doesn't really matter, right? The point is, do you know what you want? And to your point, having a clear, specific financial goal is necessary and insufficient, because money doesn't have emotion. Mm-hmm. If I, handed you a pile of money, well, this is a bad example. I was going to say, is there any emotion? Probably there is, right?
Well, I think.
But the emotion actually has little to do with the paper bills or the numbers on the screen. It has to do with what you're going to do with it. If I handed you $1 million, chances are you don't start thinking about, Donald Duck plunging into a pile of cash, right? For those of us who are old enough to get that reference. Kids don't watch Donald Duck anymore, apparently. I don't know what's going on, right? You're most likely to start thinking about, well, what could I do with $1 million, right? I'm going to invest it. If you're boring, I'm going to buy this car. I'm going to whatever, right? Like, you start thinking about what the money means to you, not just the pile of cash, right? And so, to your point, have the financial goal. You've got to have a destination that you're targeting, but you've got to know also what that means to you and what you're looking to accomplish, and ultimately what feelings and emotions you're looking to experience through the money.
Mm-hmm. And it might not even be what you're spending it on. It might be, what does it mean to you to collect the money, right? What does that mean to you? It can be anything. And what we're really talking about here broadly, if we want to pull back and take a look at it, is identity. And how do you identify with your business? How does your business connect to who you are as a human being? And often I think we try to separate those two things, right? Even when we talk about like work-life balance, like it's two different things, right? Or I have a job and then I have a home life. And yes, there's some truth to that to some degree. You need to have some level of separation. But what's not true is that you're not the same person in both places. You're absolutely the same person, on either side of that door, or metaphorical door. And so what we're really talking about is, how does your business fit into your identity, and how does your identity shape your business? And if we go back to the initial question about, what makes one entrepreneur / business successful and another less so, I'm here to argue that clarity around that identity is what it is. It's not any of the other million things that you might immediately list, but it's really about your connection to your business and your connection to the potential growth of your business.
I think about identity as the thing that sets your potential and sets your limits. Limits are all perceived, right? There are real limits. I am not anytime soon going to become the starting center for the Toronto Raptors, right? I'm 5'7" on a good day, right? It's not gonna. There are real limits. There are physical limitations. Absolutely. Don't let anyone tell you that there aren't. You're going to hurt yourself, right? However, most of the limits that we impose upon ourselves are perceived limits and perceived limitations. And I think identity is what drives those limitations. To put it another way, identity determines, the size of the jar that you're playing in, right? It determines like where the lid on the jar is, if you will. So, for example, a lot of people start consulting and they don't really think of themselves as entrepreneurs. They don't think of themselves as business people. They don't ascribe to that identity. They think of themselves as consultants, problem solvers. I am hired to do a thing. And so they go out and they get a whale client that basically replaces their income, but also with whom they are effectively an employee. So they call themselves the consultant for tax purposes, but they're effectively an employee. They think of themselves as an employee. They value themselves like an employee. They operate like an employee. This person is likely not going to go much further than whatever they think they deserve as a salary or an income. Like that employee mindset, that consultant mindset puts a real limit on what they're capable of, as long as they maintain that identity. Now, from there, you start thinking of yourself as, typically the next milestone is, oh, this is a business. I don't need one client. I can have multiple clients. I can work with many clients. I can grow my revenue beyond what I was previously earning as an income, and that now expands your possibility along with the shift in identity.
Yeah, and I think as well, there's something about the identification of your business and the identification of yourself. And those are two different things. And I think they both have their own hurdles to get over. So the notion of, am I an entrepreneur? Do I run a business? How do I feel about myself is one thing. And then there are the limitations that you put on the business itself. So to your point, maybe it's a revenue limitation. Maybe it's a, limitation around you deciding that, well, there's no way I could hire anybody. That's just too much. Maybe it's a limitation around being able to handle multiple clients, right? I can't possibly do that and still maintain my high quality of work. And so I think there's some real work to do on both sides, because you can intellectualize yourself to a place where you can start to remove the limits from your business. But it's really hard to intellectualize yourself out of limiting yourself, right? And putting yourself in a box and not seeing all of the, potential paths that you could take.
Yeah. I'll give you a good example of this. I was attending a workshop as a registrant attendee, student, client, if you will. And there were about 200 people in the room at this work. It was a live workshop. 200 people in the room. It was a 4-day course, actually, more accurately. And the presenter, who's the founder of the company, shared that his vision is to ultimately deliver that course in a stadium of 50,000 people. So he's already at 200, and it's already a really cool business and a great product and a great training, and I'm a big fan. But he's already set his sights on 50,000. Now compare that person with the person who, in his same position, is going, boy, 200's a lot. I mean, really struggling at 200. We've got all kinds of operational issues, and this kind of scale is really hard to maintain. And boy, the logistics of this are, who's going to get to 50,000? Forget 50,000. Who's going to get to 1,000?
Yeah.
In the room. It's the person that's already set their sights on the higher goal and is aligning their thinking, their mindset, their identity with the achievement of the bigger target.
Yeah, and to be clear, that's not for everybody, and that's okay. And I think you alluded to this before, but if somewhere inside of you, right, if when you think about your business, you see something bigger, even if it's just a fuzzy image way out there in the future, right? If you see something beyond where you are right now, then it's definitely worth doing the work and figuring it out so that you can start to make those big proclamations, right? So that you can set those grand goals, and in setting those goals, then set yourself on a path where you're making decisions that can support them, as opposed to unknowingly limiting where you're headed.
Well, I'm a classic example of this, right? So when I first started my company, going back, what year is it now? 2025. Going back probably 11 12 years. Okay. I said I was leaving a job where I had a team to manage in a professional services firm, and had some bad experiences as a manager. And I said, look, I'm just going to be a lone wolf. I want to be a solo consultant. I want to get paid lots of money for solving interesting client problems, when we really hands-on with clients. And like, I'm not a leader. I'm not a manager. I don't want to build a team. So guess what happened? I didn't build a team for the first half of that journey, right? 5-6 years. I was a solo consultant. I did interesting work with interesting clients, but I was the bottleneck. I could not grow beyond myself, because once I hit capacity, that was it. And it took a little bit of time at capacity for me to go and actually start to reasonably question that entire premise. Am I really a terrible leader? Am I really a terrible manager? Am I really incapable of building a team? And so the reason I bring that up is because I don't want you to, well, and so what happened is I questioned the premise, right? And then lo and behold, we grew when we built the team and we launched 90-day pipeline, and the rest is history. But my point is, I don't want you to think like, okay, well, I am what I am, and my beliefs about myself are true, and this is fixed. So I'm going to build a business, therefore, of what I'm capable of today based on my beliefs about myself.
Yep.
No, because those beliefs can, are again perceived limitations that can be questioned and that can be challenged.
Yeah, and I think the real challenge, I mean, you talked about, you question them, right? You went through a process, you kind of thought through them, and you thought, well, maybe there's another way. The real trick here is doing that regularly, because it might be that in that thinking you expand and you think about how you could grow and how things are going to get bigger. It also may be that at certain seasons of your life, you adjust your goals in the other direction. Also fine. But the important thing here is to do the self-examination, to, really think about how you relate to your business, and to continue to evolve and adjust that in the way that makes the most sense for you. And, what we're really talking about is taking away those limits that are just habitual, taking away those limits that are just stories in your head, and making a decision about what your limits are, right? If you make an intentional choice that you want to make a certain amount or grow a certain amount or whatever the case may be, then that's an intentional choice that you've made. And that's where the magic can happen, right? It's when there are just stories flying around in your head or from other people or things that you just haven't examined or considered, that you are going to end up, bumping up against limitations that don't need to exist.
And I think the big idea here that we're trying to bring home is this idea that, one, your business will not outgrow you, and that it's very much a reflection of your identity, how you see yourself, how you see the business through the lens of your identity, and therefore what you're capable of building. The business is a reflection of that. So if you don't see yourself as someone who can build a $5 million business, for example, then you're not going to, right? And then what happens practically is you start bumping up against, like in the example that I shared earlier, you start bumping up against constraints. I was bumping up against this upper limit I had achieved as a solo consultant. And enough time there, enough experience there, enough pain there. And sometimes it requires people to come in and question whether that's really what you're capable of. And eventually you go, well, maybe there's another level. But getting to that other level requires, first and foremost, an identity shift, a change in how you see yourself, a questioning of your self-imposed limits in order for the business to follow suit. So it's kind of like the lead indicator is your identity transformation. Your identity shifts are the lead indicator. And then the lag indicator, hopefully not far behind, is the actual results in the business follow suit.